obituary, and I'm certain you all have. So I'm not going to insult your intelligence by reading it word for word. But Pops said to make absolutely sure that every one of his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren were mentioned in the obituary, and their names were called out in the service today. So I'm not going to read the entire deal. I'm just going to shorten it up, and we'll try a little something like this. Claude Smith Jones left this earth to walk with Jesus on December 17, 2021, at the age of 92. He was born in Powderly, Texas, to Melvin Howard and Mary Ann Smith Jones on August 9, 1929. He was preceded in death by both of his parents, all three of his brothers, Roy, Troy, and Leo, his sister-in-law, Bernie Jones. He is survived by Mary, we all call her Nana, his son Butch, wife Michelle, grandchildren Kacy and wife Dana, Kassidy and wife Ula, son Cody, we got Cody, Lee, and Carly DeVita first. Now we go to Cody, grandchildren Dustin Hilliard, Katie Shea, Max, John Mallory, Nick Blunt, and wife Whitney. Daughter Gwen Chimka, husband John, granddaughter Brianne Allman, husband Patrick. Daughter Kaylin Ramirez, husband Santos, grandchildren Alex, Pops always called him Andro, and Ruben. Great-grandchildren Harper Jones and Campbell Jones, Oliver Jones and Landon Jones, Ella Maxwell, Ivy Allman, Alana Allman, Brandon Allman, Chloe Allman, Rayleigh Allman, Levi Allman, Ansley Ramirez, Jackson Ramirez, some people call him Joey, Aiden Adamson, Peyton Adamson, and Evelyn Blunt. He's also survived by sisters-in-law Mary and Ruth, cousin E.L. Smith, several nieces and nephews, and some very special friends, Ginger Farmer, Kathy Skidmore, and Sweet Dorothy. He wants to give special thanks to all his friends at B&W that helped make his job so much easier, and just all his friends in general. He said he never could have lived so long without his friends. Finally, we give special thanks to Summit Hospice and Stillhouse Rehabilitation and Nursing Center for taking such good care of Pops in his final days. All right, now we're going to get on to some stories, I hope. Our first song is going to be Over in the Glory Land. The words will be behind us. You can sing. I'm not a singer, so I'm not leading anybody in song either. We can enjoy the music, you can sing. Then I'll take kind of a first shot at a tribute, memory sharing. Then I'll pass the mic on to people that are much more eloquent than I am, namely my dad, my brother, cousin Katie. Then the fun part will start. We'll let Ricky Wright have the mic, tell some fun stories, and then hopefully some others will share a story or two along the way. Over in the Glory Land. All is good friends. One other benefit of living too long to die young is you have plenty of time to totally figure out how you want your funeral to go. And since I'm not a pastor, I'm certainly not even a public speaker, I'm glad he's got specific instructions for me. So we're going to do exactly as the man told me here. Let's see. His first instruction was to make absolutely sure, all capital letters sure, that he was dead before the undertaker took him away. Makes me giggle and cry all at the same time, but that's certainly a classic Claude Jones line. As far as how this service was to be officiated, he wanted you guys to all know that he absolutely accepts Jesus as his Savior. He knows that there's a loving God that's prepared a place for all of us in heaven. His prayer is that we all continue to seek, praise, love our Creator. Ideally, He'd love us for us to all go to church and hear a sermon from time to time, but today He said there will be no sermons. So we're just going to be here. We're all going to be relaxed and cheerful, if I ever relax. And this afternoon, He just wants us to remember the good times. We're going to sing together if you want to. Just listen to the music He's picked for us. Basically, just smile and enjoy the day with one another. Pop said it, I quote, "Don't worry, be happy." So that's what we're going to do. So we'll have a couple of prayers. We might mix in a Bible verse or two, but the the vast majority of the next hour or so together will be spent just sharing memories and celebrating the life of a great man. So we've got a few folks that have agreed to come up and speak after I'm done. Then later on, we'll open up the microphone to some others. I've only got one request. Keep it relatively brief. As I look across this room, it looks like most of these folks here are going to want to be home before dark. Every time Pops came to Dallas, he'd come visit us. It'd be 2:30 in the afternoon. I'm like, Popsy, where are you going? He's like, son, no way I'm getting out of Dallas traffic after dark. So let's keep that intact, keep that tradition intact, and get everybody out of here at a decent hour. All right, enough about the ground rules. Let's start with an opening prayer, and then we'll get on to Claude Jones' story time. God, we gather today to celebrate the life of a man we all loved 47. We celebrate a life of love and a life that's an absolute legacy to those left behind. Our Pops is now free from pain and suffering and walking with Jesus. We all know he's in a much better place than he was on Friday morning. So we pray that this is not to be a day of mourning, but a day of celebration of a life that touched us all. We celebrate the memories we'll always have. As we fellowship together, sing together, listen to your word, and hear eulogies of a great man, please focus our minds on you and the good times we had with Pops. We look forward to hearing many stories of all the ways he positively impacted the lives of those with us here today. Let us rejoice over every testimony, knowing that his life was a life well lived and much deserving. He was a big, strong man that gave hugs and love way before it was cool. He used 47 to share love with each and every person he encountered. Many of my friends growing up didn't have grandparents around, but Pops was always there. I'm not sure he ever missed a ball game that Kassidy or I ever played, and we're talking about 1,000 games over a 15-year period. He became kind of a surrogate grandpa to many of our buddies. They all called him Pops, and he loved them all 47. Some of my best memories are growing up are Sunday afternoons at Pops and Nana's farm in Blossom. Pops would cook his world-famous steaks, and after he finished with his time on the grill, he'd come to the dining room table and spend what feels like an hour peeling a baked potato for every one of his grandkids. But there's one thing that, those steaks and taters were good, but man, I can smell those Pops homemade rolls come out of the oven right now. My brother Kacy was probably one of the pickiest eaters you've ever met. So, on a prime filet, without not 1 ounce of fat on it, he wouldn't eat half of it because it had too much fat. But he would devour countless numbers of Pops rolls. If you look at him today, I'm not sure he understood at the time how much fat and carbs are actually in those rolls, because I don't think he'd do that today. We had fresh vegetables from the garden. We rode horses. We threw the football. We fished. Counted rabbits on our rides home in the morning. This one kind of makes Dan a cringe. When Kassidy and I would spend the night there, right before bed, we'd go out on Pop's back porch. We'd stand on the back porch. He had this big oak tree. Before bed, we'd see who could pee the highest up the tree. And after we finished peeing, he'd tuck us in bed. He'd say, "Love you 47. Call me if you need me." Man, there weren't many times I needed him, but I promise you this. I felt safe and loved at Pop's house. Except that one time there was a scorpion on my bed, right beside my pillow. I needed him that night, and I called him pretty loud. Pop's taught me many things. He taught me how to light the charcoal in the Weber grill. He taught me how to peel a tater, cook a good steak. We gathered eggs from the chickens. We fished for these, I don't even know what these things were. Big-headed, skinny, malnourished catfish, the ugliest thing I've ever seen. He had some of those in his pond. I don't know why we did that. Sometimes after we finish those steak dinners, we go and pull his finger. I think some of you guys know what that means. I've never taught my daughters, we never did that at my house. And if you want to know why, I'll introduce you to my wife, Dana. active school baseball team in the early 90s. As you guys all know, baseball is Pop's favorite sport. And the catcher was his favorite position. He had lots of advice for me. One of the favorite things he said was, swing hard in case you hit it. I think there's nothing he hated worse than watching somebody strike out looking on a third strike. How in the heck are you going to hit the ball if you don't swing? I remember one day my senior year, I was in the on-deck circle, and Pops was in his lawn chair there where he's always sitting, and Ricky Rock was standing right beside him. And Ricky looks through the fence and says, "Hey, Jonesy, swing hard in case you hit it." I wonder where he got that line from. I was a big boy, a lot bigger than I am today. I most definitely swung hard. The problem was it was usually just a tad early. I hit some of the most epic foul ball home runs down the third baseline you've ever seen. I don't know if how many of you guys have seen the movie Major League. A guy in there named Joe Boo. A lot like Joe Boo. I struck out more times than I can count on a curveball in the third. On the positive side, Pops taught me how to talk to the opposing hitter as a catcher. I've only met a couple of guys in my life that I think are as good at talking trash as I am. I said a lot of things to these guys when I was late. Pops definitely encouraged and helped me hone those skills. Some things I said I can't repeat today. Sometimes I'd tell people what pitch was coming. I don't think there were many games we finished that the opposing team liked me very much. But I hope today they all know it was just part of the game, and I love each of those guys, 47. He taught me one other little trick in baseball. He said when I was catching it low on a way pitch, I should kind of reach for it and stumble and act like it went to the backstop. And hopefully the runner on third would break for home and I could just kind of coolly tag the guy out because I still had the ball. I think I only pulled that off one time, but that man definitely knew his baseball. As you all know by now, the most important thing Pops taught me was how to love. He loved every person in this room this much. He loved you all, 47. Thank you, Popsy, for teaching us to love. I know this should be a sad day for us, but I just don't see it that way. Pop's ticker has been in bad shape for a long time. I think we all got more Pop's love on this earth than we ever dreamed possible. He was one of my best friends and one of the greatest men I've ever known. He lived a life of immense love for God, Nana, his children, his great-grandchildren, and everyone he touched each and every day. He was a big man that gave big hugs, dollars to his children and grandchildren each time he saw them, and love to all that he touched way before it was cool. I truly believe the number one thing God wants us to do on this earth is love our neighbors. Thank you, Popsy, for teaching me that. We all love you, 47. Most of all, we thank you for teaching us to love our neighbors as ourselves. I'm going to leave here today thanking God for the extra time I got with Pops. I'll be eternally grateful that my daughters, Harper and Campbell, got to spend much more time with my boy than I ever dreamed possible. Popsy, I just hope and pray everyone in this room will think of your shared love daily and use your 47 to touch each person they come into contact with each and every day. All right, after this next song,
So, I have to confess, I never did like small talk much. Those of you who know me probably know that. I always thought it was a little boring and somewhat awkward. I prefer to jump straight to the meaning of life type conversations. This is actually something I've thought about quite a bit. What are we supposed to be doing here? What's the point of all this? Well, in Matthew 22, Jesus boils it all down to one thing: love. Love God with all your heart, love your neighbor as yourself. I think it's really that simple. We're here to learn how to love others, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. So why am I telling you this? Because I spent my entire life watching Pops demonstrate this love to literally everyone that he came across. He was a master of small talk. He liked to talk about the Rangers. He also liked to talk about politics. But the thing is, to him, it wasn't small talk. He was showering love on everyone that he met, all the people that he met. He was making them feel appreciated. He was letting them know that they mattered. Wouldn't it be ironic if it turns out that small talk is the meaning of life? Now, don't get me wrong, there was a lot more to Pops than small talk. He was the patriarch of the Jones family. And his loving example will continue to radiate through our entire family for generations. He was strong, intelligent, and wise. He taught us hard work and responsibility. He was also funny and kind. He loved kids and they loved him. I can remember ever since I was little, he tells he loved us 47. I keep hearing about 47. In fact, I've had that number in my email address for a couple of decades now. What does it even mean? Where does 47 come from? I honestly don't know where it came from, but I know what it means. It's an indescribable kind of love that Pops demonstrated to everyone we've met. Another one of those not exactly small topics that I've thought a lot about over the years is what happens after we leave this world? Where is he now? What's happening? I strongly believe that he's now experiencing unimaginable love, joy, and celebration with Jesus, and also all those that have gone on before him. This is only a temporary separation, and I know that we'll see him again soon. I'd like to share a few Bible verses to give you an idea of why I'm so hopeful. Luke 23, verse 43, Jesus tells the thief on the cross, "Today you will be with me in paradise." Luke 16, verse 22, when the beggar dies, the angels came and carried him to Abraham's side. In 2 Corinthians 5, verse 8, Paul says, "We are confident and would prefer to be away from the body and at home with the Lord." Acts 7, verses 55-56, as Stephen was being martyred, he looked up to heaven and saw the glory of God and Jesus standing at the right hand of God. "Look," he said, "I see heaven open and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God." John 14, verses 2 and 3, Jesus says, "In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also." Psalm 116, verse 15 says, "Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints." And then finally, Revelation 21:4 tells us how all this ends. "He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." So what's he doing now? I imagine that he and Jesus are having a pretty intense discussion about politics, and probably also how the Rangers will do next season. Thanks.
Before I go much further, I want to tell you one thing of his instructions that you haven't been told yet. He requested that his casket be opened during the service so that he could see and hear everything that happened. So I hope I don't screw up too badly. Some of you may not know that Pop's brother was a preacher. Pop certainly believed in the Bible like you remember when I was a young child. Every Sunday morning, I'd see him opening up the Bible and reading for a good period of time. So he certainly is religious. He certainly believes in the Bible. But as Kacy said earlier, he requested that this service not be a preaching ceremony, not be a sermon. He wanted everyone to walk away with a smile and hopefully not a tear. So with that in mind, everything I say is hopefully from that perspective. But before I get too far into that, there are three statements from Scripture that I'd like to read. One from King David in Psalms 116, I think it may have already been read. And two from his son King Solomon in Ecclesiastes. They go like this: "Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his faithful servants." King David did that. And it tells me that in some sense, in some fashion, perhaps beyond our understanding that we've had to live through this life, our Creator is now happy at our death. And King Solomon said, "The dead who have already died are happier than the living who are still alive." So Pops is apparently happier than we are right now. King Solomon also said, "The day of death better than the day of birth." Those three statements are all in Scripture, and I sincerely, with my whole heart, believe all three of them. So maybe it's fitting to celebrate Pops on this occasion, and and not dwell on grieving his departure. With that in mind, before I go too much further, I do want to get into some of his beliefs. He did have some sincere beliefs. One of his true and sincere beliefs was that the only reason he was bald-headed was because he used Vitalis V7 back in the 50s and 60s. And that caused it. And of course, he also gave it to his young son. Turn my pages here. Pops also believed that Texas is a much better place to live than Ohio. He lived in Ohio for about a year and a half. He made some sincere friends, but he didn't want to live there. He loved Texas. Pops sincerely believed that yogurt is not made to eat. But pecan ice cream is. He truly believed that John Wayne was indeed a rough and tough guy and a good American. He truly believed that strawberry perfume does not smell good. Now, if you were associated with him at B&W, you might know some of the story behind that I'm not going to get into, but he didn't like strawberry perfume. Pop sincerely believed that you shouldn't work on Sunday. Pops believed that it's really difficult to have too many charcoal grills. He had several. He believed that if you live to be 100 years old, you can attribute it to anything you darn well please. He certainly believed that 47 is a good number. To my knowledge, he never told anyone why or where 47 came from, but he loved that number, and he loved you 47. Pops believed that West Texas, particularly the Lubbock area, was a wonderful place to live. He also believed that if relatives and friends were not a part of the equation, he had nothing to go on but just choosing a place to live, and he could choose anywhere in the world to live, he would very likely choose Paris, Texas. Pop sincerely believed that the prettiest girls in the world were in Paris, Texas. I didn't do that. Pops believed that his mother was as good as any woman ever to live. Pops believed that in considering bras, bigger sizes are better. Pops believed that Jane Russell was a beautiful lady. Now, those of you too young to remember, Jane Russell was a well-known movie star in the 40s and 50s. And he also believed that Dolly Parton can sure sing well. Pops believed that Nolan Ryan, after his retirement as a pitcher, was a superb leader for the Texas Rangers. And his replacement had both his priorities and his sensibilities significantly misplaced. Pops believed that Hank Aaron was a really good hitter. And he believed it when Hank Aaron was young, long before he set all the records. Pops believed that his friend Buddy did him a superb and fantastic and great favor by introducing him to Mary Lee. Pops believed that the Texas Rangers made a really stupid mistake when they used Ricky Wright as a pitcher. Because he thought that Ricky Wright was a much better hitter even than a pitcher, and he could have been one of the best hitters ever to live. Now, I consider Pops to have been a very honest man. Compared to most people, he's honest, no doubt about it. But he did believe that on rare occasions, it was acceptable to tell an untruth, if in doing so, it hurt no one and saved someone from pain. Pops believed that Eddie Matthews was a great third baseman. Pops believed that Willie Mays wasn't quite as good at catching fly balls as Mickey Mantle. He believed that Tony Romo was as good as they come in quarterback. Pops believed he could grill a steak better than you can get in any restaurant. Pops believed that if he had been at the large wedding reception where Jesus miraculously turned 130 gallons of water into wine, Pops would have preferred that it had been beer. Pops believed that dogs were fine and wonderful animals, and he loved them, and that they should remain outside. Pops believed that your fireplace in your home wasn't or isn't quite big enough. It should be a little wider, a little deeper, to hold bigger and more logs. Pops believed that a typical half-ton pickup truck should be able to carry a full cord or 3 tons of firewood, as long as you drive it really carefully and easily over the bumps. And I'll tell you, he did break more than one axle. Pops believed that a pile of green onions cut up and smothered in hot bacon grease, along with a big hunk of cornbread and a large glass of sweet tea, could make a very good meal. He believed that putting a little RC in your iced tea, RC Cola in your iced tea, was a good thing to do. He believed that Jim Beam and Jack, but as he did learn, and I watched him learn it, you'd better not swallow the chew, especially on a hot summer day when you're working out in the hot sun in your garden. He was down on all fours and I was laughing. I don't know if you ever forgot that. He did also believe that smoking and chewing tobacco, or tobacco of any kind, is not really too good for you. Pops believed that you should memorize the birthdays of all your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and brothers and nieces and nephews and aunts and uncles and cousins. And he did. Pops believed that the very best way to handle a personal overweight problem was to buy bigger britches. Pops believed that any steak should be cooked well done, certainly to at least medium. Charred is okay, but rare is inedible. And it should always have a baked potato. Pops believed that when you're cutting wood, the tree doesn't always fall the way it's leaning. Pops believed that poison ivy and poison oak can have either 3 or 5 leaflets. Pops believed that the decision to allow Howard Cosell to be a sportscaster was obviously made by an idiot. Pops believed that you have to catch it before you can throw it. If you ever played baseball for him, I'm sure you've heard that hundreds of times. Meaning, of course, don't get in too big a hurry to throw the ball before you catch it or you'll miss it. Catch it before you throw it. Pops believed that Hank Williams was a much better singer than his son, Hank Williams Jr. Pops believed that he was blessed to have Mary Lewis, his wife. And he believed that he was blessed to have the children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren which he had. And he believed that he was blessed to have the extended family and the friends which he had. And he believed he was sincere. He did believe that the Holy Bible was the Word of God. And I'm going to end now talking about his beliefs. But I would like to tell just a few maybe interesting stories. When Pops was a child, he grew up with a very poor family, truly poor family. And he was 6 or 8 years old in the middle of the Depression with a poor family where people did not waste food. Food was sometimes hard to come by. Some people were starving. His family always had food. It wasn't maybe the best food, and it wasn't much for starving. His family always had food. It wasn't maybe the best food, and it wasn't much wanted, but they always had food. But they never threw food away. They never wasted it. So one day at lunch, he sat down to eat at his place at the table, and he picked up a jug of sorghum molasses and started pouring it on his plate. I think all the families probably heard this story, but the rest of them probably haven't. He started pouring sorghum molasses on his plate, watching for his mother waiting for her to tell him to stop, because he couldn't waste it. She didn't say anything. He kept going, and he kept going, until his plate was full. She never said a word. He finally put the sorghum molasses down. They all finished their meal. He left the table. She never said a word. He came back to the next meal. His plate was still at his place with the rest of the syrup. He said it took about 4 or 5 meals to finish up the syrup. But she never complained. Another story on Pops. When I was just a child and my brother Cody was about a year old, we lived in a house with a front porch that 2 sides of the porch were connected to the house by a wall. 2 sides of the porch were open. And he decided he was going to build a picket fence on the porch to keep Cody in, where Cody could play outside on the porch without getting out into the yard, out into the road, and having any danger. Pop set a Saturday aside to build this fence. He went outside and built one side of the fence along the porch one morning. Came in and had lunch. Went back outside and built the other side of the porch that afternoon, and Cody followed him out and climbed the side that he'd already finished. In 1963, Pops was working on his 2nd year as a Little League coach. Several of you might have heard this story, but I know all of you haven't. The 2nd year as Little League coach, the way they got new players during that time was either at some of the city parks or at the grade schools, they would have tryouts for all the young boys who were 9 to 12 years old. The boys would show up in the afternoon, maybe 4 to 6 o'clock. They'd have an opportunity to hit. They'd have an opportunity to throw and catch a ball and show the coaches how they could do. And after 4 or 5 of these different places around town in 1 week, the coaches would all get together at the boys club, and they would bid on the players they wanted. Each coach was given 50,000 points to bid. Well, this particular year, 1963, the 2nd year coach, there was a player on his team whose father started coaching another team, so he wanted that player on his team. And so in exchange for taking the player off of Pop's team, he gave Pops 5,000 of his points to bid. So that year, everybody had 50,000 points, except Pops. He had 55,000. That year, with all of his points, he bid 50,001 point on one 9-year-old. And several people thought he was an idiot. Several people made fun of him and made some snide remarks about it. Well, that 9-year-old went on to play for him. Come to find out he had a younger brother who come along. And in that particular time, a brother who came along, if they had a brother on the team, you could get them free. They just got on the team. And that brother had another younger brother come along. Pop's got 3 brothers. They were all named Wright. So he got all 3 of the Wright brothers for 50,000 at 1 point. 3 of the best players that ever come along with Paris. So he made a wise decision.
Jesus, safe on his gentle breast, there by his love o'ershaded, sweetly my soul doth rest, safe in the arms of Jesus, safe from corroding care, safe from the world's temptations, sin cannot harm me there, free from the blight of sorrow, free from my doubts and fears.